The House Committee on Natural Resources and Outdoor Recreation will please come to order. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Chairman Howell.
Here.
Representatives Wakeman.
Present.
Kelly. Riley.
Here.
Rendon. Here. Eisen.
Here.
Sowerby.
Here.
Benzie. Kohetzky. Here. Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. You've been provided with copies of the May 27th minutes of our last committee meeting. Is there a motion to approve those minutes, or are there additions or corrections? Rep. Rendon moves to approve. Hearing no objections, the minutes are approved. On the agenda, we had House Bill 5777, which we are going to be taking action on today. However, Representative Benzie, coming from the Upper Peninsula, is running a little bit late due to road conditions, so I'm going to defer that until the latter part of the meeting. So with that will let us get into the meat of the main event today. We are fortunate to have Kerrin O'Brien with us today. She's the director of the Michigan Recycling Coalition. She's been working on this project for quite a long time. And so she is going to be talking a bit about recycling and about the task force and how this whole process came to where we are today. So welcome.
Thank you very much, Representative Howell. Chair, members of the committee, I'm happy to be here today. This is interesting times, and appreciate the mask parade today. But before I launch into this story, I guess I should prepare. Can we put the first slide up, or do I have control of that?
I can help you.
Okay. Great. Okay, so before I launch into the story, I want to frame the issue for you as simply as I can. Current state solid waste policy was really established when we were most concerned about having enough landfill space for all of our waste. In 1987, the Mo-Bro garbage barge went looking for a place to take New York waste after the landfill closed there. They traveled down the eastern seaboard all the way to Brazil and then had to come back up because no one wanted their waste. As a result, federal legislation required states to assure that they have the disposal capacity to meet the state's needs. In Michigan, we put that responsibility on each county through solid waste planning process, and that process is called for and paid by the state. So the crux of that policy really requires that counties have 5.5 years of disposal capacity, either within that county or in an explicit authorization with other counties. If the county can't assure that they have at least 5.5 years of capacity, then they must make way for the development of new capacity. But since county solid waste planning really hasn't been funded in 20 years, our solid waste Our solid waste policy is essentially about making sure we can site and expand landfills. So that policy has been a really great success because now we have more disposal capacity than ever. And that overcapacity keeps the cost of waste disposal artificially low and depresses the growth of an economy that maximizes the value of materials, that eliminates waste, and that circulates resources for continual productive use. In spite of this policy and the resulting economics, though, Michigan businesses and communities have been investing and continue to invest in recycling. Not because it's just the right thing to do, but also because it's good for business. So this is who we represent. Let's see here. So the Michigan Recycling Coalition is a statewide organization. We advocate for recycling. We are an association of professionals. We host a conference. We provide programming, education, really represent our members at the statewide level. Let's see. We have about 400 plus professional members. They're program managers, they're manufacturers, they're service providers, and they're equally represented in both the public and private sector. The nature of this business is really about public and private partnership. Getting used to this here. And, you know, the work, every business, institution, and household in Michigan produces waste. And so there's opportunities everywhere to reduce waste and find productive ways to use what's already circulating in our economy. So our members and these sponsors of our conference this year, they benefit from a circular economy that makes them and Michigan more economically and environmentally resilient. They're leading the way, frankly, to turning the wasteful practices of the past to turning into the business opportunities of the future. And we want policies that support them and what they do because they're creating jobs right here in Michigan with our recyclables. So we work together to help Michigan leaders understand the value of the materials we pay to throw away every day. The MRC identified like 12 years ago that we really needed to fund the recycling issue. And it is in fact the support of our members that allowed us to help lead the efforts to pass Renew funding in 2018. And so with funding secured, we now think it's time to adapt the policy framework to work to the benefit of Michigan communities and businesses, the economy, the environment. So before I get into specific bills, I'd like to speak to what the recycling industry already knows. We're talking about a system really that goes far beyond recycling at the curb. The global pandemic really showed us how devastating supply chain disruptions can be. When recycling stopped at the curb and at drop-offs and at the retail stores, the companies and the employees that work for them that depend on these materials to manufacture really suffered. And we all learned the importance of toilet paper as a result of the virus. Toilet paper is manufactured in northern Michigan from recycled milk cartons. Lightweight paper bags for fast food takeout are made from recycled cardboard and paper from the UP. And there's a clamor for Michigan's bottles and cans that come through the deposit law because they are the highest quality materials and they're competed for on a global market. And the use of plastic is on the rise and becoming, frankly, problematic. Farmers are using massive quantities of plastic sheeting to reduce weeds, but they're left with huge rolls of dirty plastic sheeting that either gets buried or burned. Boats across the state are shrink-wrapped seasonally. They all want recycling services. The yard waste that gets picked up at the curbside can be mixed with food waste and and turned into a rich, nutrient-rich compost that makes soils more productive. So we lose benefits when these organics go into the landfill. Let's see. Michigan manufacturers are actively seeking beneficial uses for their byproducts because even though disposal is cheap, waste does not bring value to any company. If Michigan brands and businesses are to meet their own sustainability goals, they'll need the support of good services and policies because it has been become an important branding tool. Recycling is a lot more than just saving landfill space. These materials have inherent value of their own, and again, they create jobs. So while it's likely you've heard that recycling markets right now are challenged, recycling isn't going away. Markets fluctuate based on a variety of factors. Increasing the domestic use of recycled feedstock and producing recyclables in turn that meet specific strategic specifications will grow the demand, and that's what we're trying to do. Our job here is to create the policy environment that makes these activities thrive. When China stopped taking our recyclables back in 2007, the demise of recycling was reported far and wide, but we're still here doing this work. Recycling really has become a part of the DNA of communities and businesses, not only in Michigan, but throughout the country and the world. And recycling is not just an urban issue. Emmett County is a nationally recognized rural recycling system because they've put the policies and the practices in place to deliver a steady supply of valued feedstocks to Michigan manufacturers. In fact, 90% of what Emmett County recycles is consumed by businesses here in Michigan. And while it may not be possible that all Michigan recyclables are consumed here, we can certainly attract more businesses by assuring that we meet the supply demands they have. So what we really need to get down to is the business of solving the economic problems that prevent us from maximizing the value of these materials that we already have circulating in our economy. Okay. So many of you have been hearing about the need to update solid waste law for a long time. But for the past about 6 years, two groups have really been working together to make that happen. In 2014, the Governor's Recycling Council began its work to identify good policies that grow recycling. It was a 9-member panel. It included recycling experts and waste experts. And very shortly after that, the then DEQ, appointed representatives to the Solid Waste and Sustainability Advisory Panel. And that panel was charged with really looking at Part 115 and figuring out how it needs to be updated to be more commensurate with a sustainable materials management lens. The department will say a lot more about this process and about the stakeholders, but it was a very large group, and the Environmental Council, the counties, communities, townships, the chamber, the Chemistry Council, the Farm Bureau, the waste industry. A lot of people were involved with this for many years. The bills that you have before you today are the result of years of work and consensus building. And through this process, we have addressed and resolved the majority of issues that stakeholders have identified. The policy changes represented in these bills really are the key to unlocking significant investment in this work. So currently, Michiganders spend over $1 billion and to landfill nearly $600 million worth of materials every year. That's a lot of money. By updating the framework within which we make decisions about how we manage materials at the end of their useful life, we can shift that spend to more effectively divert materials to productive use and keep those materials circulating rather than being a burden on future generations. So if we can triple our recycling rate, we will have 138,000 new jobs. We will have $9 billion in annual labor income. We will generate 33 million plus of economic output. These are significant numbers. By funding and overhauling county planning, we can spark local investment and really transform the way we think about and manage waste. So the proposed changes. So this large and very diverse group of stakeholders have been working to shore up and modernize Michigan policy based on the knowledge that recyclables have value to markets in Michigan, in the Great Lakes, in this country, and frankly, internationally. And the recycling industry has worked to advance these initiatives in the face of policies that have worked against us for decades. In spite of that, residents are now expecting that recycling services will be included in the suite of public services available to them. Businesses need services to be competitive and achieve their own sustainability goals. And we must make services universal and match them with education that drives informed participation. We must do better because landfills are really no place to store usable, recyclable material. So let's get to the specifics of the bill. Stakeholders have really agreed here that we need to enable communities to make smart plans to achieve goals that work for them, to serve their residents, and to create a local sustainable economy. So 5812, this is really the definition and goals section. The definitions are important and they reflect new thinking around sustainable materials management rather than disposal and are really a shift in how we're looking at these materials. The move from solid waste to a focus on materials management is really about seeing resources instead of seeing waste, and that is significant. This section also talks about goals. We have a state goal of 45% recycling and a interim goal of 35% recycling by 2025, which is coming right up. So in order to meet these goals, it's not okay to just put the goals out. We really need to identify the steps that are going to be taken to meet those goals. And so the work groups came up with these benchmark recycling standards, and these standards are really based on providing access to recycling opportunities all over the state. And so, for example, urbanized residents, 90% of them should have curbside recycling, and that is what every county then will be working toward. Drop-offs will be available in populations less than, county populations less than 100,000, as from one drop-off to every 10,000 in population, but drop-offs will be available really throughout the whole state because they are a good tool. But counties really are going to determine for themselves how this works in achieving or making progress toward these benchmark standards. So House Bill 5813 is really about the disposal areas. It's about landfills. It's about updating licensing requirements. It's about post-closure requirements that assure public health and safety. It's about extending or reducing post-closure time based on operations at the landfill. Are they meeting monitoring goals and guidelines, or are they not, frankly? $5814 is financial assurance. This is really insurance to pay for problems. Landfills need a level of financial assurance so that when problems come up later, the state is not saddled with paying for those problems. Updates for financial assurance really help to cover and make up for inflation and hope to better reflect the cost to remediate any problems and save taxpayer funds. The intent here is really to prevent tax holders from having to pay the costs of problems at landfills that have really gone wrong. I don't know if you've heard of the Richfield landfill, but that landfill went bankrupt before it was even closed. The leachate collection and management from that landfill used up all the financial assurance that was available for that site, and so 30 years of post-closure will be paid for at the cost of taxpayers, and that is what we're looking to prevent. 5815 is really a miscellaneous section. There's a lot of smaller issues that we're trying to shore up to meet the goals of the whole bill, or the whole Part 115. But for my organization, it's really about providing details about funding for infrastructure development, for market development, for education. It's really about using that money as incentive for counties to make progress on achieving their goals and plans. If counties, don't step up to plan, then we'll be looking to, private businesses in that area to fill that gap. Material utilization facilities. This is the part of the big package that really focuses on the materials management facilities that are not disposal facilities, recycling facilities, material recovery facilities, composting facilities, and more. So these facilities really haven't been provided any oversight or very little oversight. And this allows the agency, the state agency, to step up and to make sure that they are not causing problems for the community, frankly. It also creates a level playing field for these material management facilities with each other and with disposal as an option. It elevates and legitimizes these facilities. They can be counted as assets and developed in conjunction with county plans. Really important if we're going to foster this industry. And specifically, the increased regulations on composting facilities decreases the problem of bad actors who just collect this material to collect the tipping fee and make no plans to turn that material back into any kind of product that can be sold on the marketplace. That's what this section is really trying to address. And finally, 5817 is really about materials management plans. This is the old county solid waste management planning process. It is now the county materials management planning process because we've, changed our thinking about that. Counties will be funded through the Renew Fund to engage in planning, to look at the activity in their county in a real comprehensive way and to figure out how they want to do better. Municipalities and townships will be active players in this process. Plans will be developed and they will have to report and track progress toward the goals in those plans, and they can really, again, be customized to meet local needs and interests in business development. And a key development or a key benefit for haulers and landfills of this section is that material can now move freely across the state. It used to be that counties had to get authorization for material movement, waste movement between counties. This takes that away, makes doing business across county lines easier, and so that was something we were able to negotiate and give with also the expansion of these material management facilities. So planning also now prioritizes local control of facility siting, really taking it out of this kind of if we need it, it's going to go there, and really giving the county as much control as possible in citing something that they've defined a need for. If they can't find that, but they've defined the need for it, then we've also got mechanisms in place to put those facilities in place if needed. So planning is really intended to foster the public-private partnership that we keep talking about to meet these local infrastructure and market development and service needs. And frankly, grant funding through Renew will support the development of those local and regional programs and infrastructure. So instead of paying for disposal and managing landfills forever, we can invest in collecting, sorting, baling, processing, and selling materials in a way that does not harm the environment and in fact strengthens our economies. Just as the volume of waste is ever increasing, so will be the cost of managing this waste. But the opportunity cost of putting in the landfill is much higher than just that cost. Every Michigan resident, business, and institution has something to gain by being better stewards of all of these materials we use every day. By finding the productive uses for them, we create new services, and we provide feedstocks to drive business. So we need policies that really turn our liabilities into assets, and we are poised to make that shift right now. We have funding in hand. The vast majority of stakeholders support these updated policies. There's no better time than now. And that's all I have prepared.
I'd like my final comment. No better time than now. Questions from members. Representative Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Where are my notes? How will this affect private landfills that need decomposable material, so that they can create electricity. We have we have some in my area. We do have landfills that rely on material coming in so that they can use the decomposing to make methane, and they have 2 big turbines. So you're talking about limiting this product so that they will be limited?
I don't believe that's really what we're talking about. The yard waste ban on landfills, landfilling yard waste, was really put in place because landfills aren't designed to capture and use methane. They've been adapted and
We have 2 that do that now.
They've been adapted to do that, but there are still some.
So you can't say they don't do it when we, near my district, we do that now.
And you're talking about a particular facility that fills the bladders with that
They
material?
bury it, they cover it, they got pipes down there. I've done work on the turbines, okay, I know. So
Yeah.
I'm just saying, it just seems we're taking this trash and we're making electricity out of it. I just don't see why we'd want to stop that.
I don't think we're talking about stopping that at all. I think what we're talking about is providing a variety of opportunities to many businesses to do what they can that's productive with that
So you would
material.
not limit these landfills from taking biodegradable material so that they can use it to produce electricity. That's what you're saying. You're not going to limit these landfills from doing that.
There's a yard waste ban already in place that we do support, and we're not suggesting that there are bans on landfilling any additional materials, no.
Okay. So you're not going to limit, this does not limit
Right,
this material going into this so they can produce electricity.
correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Representative Rendell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Great presentation.
Thank you.
I just have a question about the recyclable materials that, because in my small county, much different than the urbans, we have a recycling center. I can go on Wednesdays and Saturdays to dump my recycles. It's all sorted, everything works like a charm, but it's just a part of life if you live in a rural community. Right now, there's not a big market for glass.
Yes.
Is that a part of this program?
Yeah, well, that could be a part of grants, program development, whatever efforts we put into trying to fund and identify new situations, new programs to bring. Michigan is a bottle bill state, so much of our glass is already captured through that system, and that glass, because of the nature of it being separated, has value and is used and marketed. The unfortunate part of curbside and drop-off recycling, especially curbside, is that glass breaks and gets mixed in with other materials and becomes a contaminant. And I think that with materials management planning, communities can begin to address those issues and maybe identify alternative solutions so that the glass that is being separated and recycled can actually be managed in a way that it doesn't contaminate the whole process, and that it maintains its integrity and can be used for beneficial use.
That said, so what you're saying, if I'm hearing you correctly, is that our bottle bill kind of stands in the way. If we didn't have that bottle bill and we could put all the aluminum in one and all the glass separated, would that be beneficial to this plan?
I think that really recycling everything and anything we can is the answer. We have to figure out the most productive ways to deliver the highest quality materials to the marketplace that we can. The bottle bill has many pros and it's got some cons, especially as we've got these parallel systems to manage materials. But as it stands, it's the highest quality materials we can deliver to the market because of how citizens take it back to the store and it's separated into those streams. So if that bottle gets broken, it's broken in with a bunch of other glass, and it's not a problem and doesn't contaminate other materials.
Except, as we've seen recently, that process has been diverted.
We're all storing stuff in our garage right now, yes.
Representative Riley has a question.
Thank you. You mentioned something about bad actors and composting. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, composting facilities haven't gotten much oversight from the state agency. It's not currently in our law, so they've had some limitations in actually what they can do to stop someone who decides that they're going to collect the yard waste from a community or from citizens and take the tipping fee for accepting that, but then just stack it up on their back 40 until it stinks and creates a problem. And so the state agency in that case is only brought in when the neighbors begin to smell that pile and it's already a problem. With these increased regulations on compost sites, there will be requirements to manage at certain rates, and hopefully they'll be incentivized to produce a product at the end of the life of the compost or the end of the life of the yard waste that can actually be used by landscapers and farmers in a variety of different applications.
It seems like to me like this is an issue that should be handled locally within. If somebody is making a situation bad for their neighbor, then we have laws that prohibit that already. And I'm just kind of concerned that this may be tying the hands of people who are getting into composting, especially small-time people.
Yeah, well, I would agree with you that composting is a very local issue. Yard waste, organic waste is produced all across the state. Everybody produces it. And if we can manage it as close to those sites as possible, we're all better off, frankly. And frankly, we're better off if we can use it close by. But the state agency and the regulations that are on the books now haven't done a lot to protect communities, Macomb Township being one of them, from somebody who is bent on doing business and going through lawsuits. This is an attempt to back that process up to make sure that composters are trained and certified and they have all the right kind of tools and equipment and siting to actually do the process justice and produce a product at the end of that.
Okay, yeah, I won't go into, I have lots of questions about this, but I just have an overall sense that whenever you increase regulation, you increase the cost to the consumer down the road. And I'm concerned about all of the regulation that we're looking at putting in here, but I'll just kind of leave it at that point.
And I guess I will say, Representative Riley, that composters have been an important part of this process, and for many years composters were actually asking for this type of increase in regulation because the bad actors brought down their businesses. And if they could, if we could level the playing field and provide information that put everybody on a level playing field, then it would be no problem. But that is not, it did not end up being the case.
Thank you. I would just say like the marketplace, it kind of does that for itself, but I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay. I would make a note that we certainly are not going to finish the testimony on this series of bills today, so everybody is going to have an opportunity that does not get a chance to testify at future hearings, so we can get more questions answered, more information. Representative Sowerby, you're all set. Representative Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Subpart 6, I see that's part of your bill. Okay. Incinerators and open burning. Mike, you want to get rid of incinerators? Is that what your goal is? It doesn't make, it just says we're going to get with current practices. My county incinerates, okay, so that we can increase capacity in the landfill. This is something we want to get away from, is what you're leaning to?
I don't have the specifics of that section of the bill in my head right now, but I don't believe we're trying to get necessarily rid of incinerators. Michigan doesn't have, but I believe, one incinerator, municipal solid waste incinerator at this time. Open burning, has been banned. That is not, we can't do that in the state.
Okay, thank you.
Any remaining questions? Thank you very much. Obviously, you've devoted a great deal of thought and effort into this issue.
Thank you
we
so
look
much.
forward to
Appreciate the
working with you.
opportunity.
At this point, we're going to hear from the sponsors of the bill. The vice chair had to step out to take a call, and Representative Calley has graciously volunteered to chair while Representative Sowerby and I testify as to our bill.
When you're ready, gentlemen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll lead out just because my bill is the first one sequentially in the package of bills. It is 5812. I might comment that the good news here for all of us is that the heavy lifting has been done on these bills. As Ms. O'Brien indicated, there's 6 years of effort into this. It's pretty amazing that they've been able to get this many stakeholders to debate and discuss such a complex issue and come up with a pretty good consensus as to what is feasible, practically feasible, and what will benefit the environment. So I'm real pleased to be the beneficiary of all their hard work, and I'm really pleased that it's a bipartisan effort. Vice Chair Sowerby and I are testifying together. This is not a partisan issue. This is an issue as to what is good for the state of Michigan, regardless of your political perspective. There's two things, really, as I see it, in these bills that are key. We want to improve the planning process for siting landfills, and we want to increase the availability of recycling and composting. The law we have right now is really oriented just toward landfills. The 70 landfills we got in Michigan were established through the existing planning process by and large. I had some direct experience with that in Lapeer County. We went through the solid waste management plan a number of years ago, and I can tell you it was a traumatic experience for many people in the county because we were obligated, if possible, to find landfill sites within the county. And you can also imagine that not every neighborhood was keen on having the landfill next to them. So it became a very contentious process trying to work out an appropriate place and one that the residents in the area would be reasonably protected and comfortable with. I think this more broad-based planning that we're talking about will be a much more user-friendly situation for the neighbors and for the various actors in the field. Richfield landfill was alluded to in Ms. O'Brien's testimony. Unfortunately, I'm pretty familiar with that. It's not in my county, but it's on my county border. And it has been an environmental disaster. Going to cost the taxpayer a great deal of money. It was there before this process began. We need to get a handle on that kind of situation, make sure that it never happens again. We don't dump these kind of costs onto the taxpayers, and at the same time have very ineffective landfilling going on. The goals that, again, Ms. O'Brien alluded to, I think are the keys to the bill. We got to have goals to begin to make progress to get more materials recycled in our state. The goal, as she indicated, was to 2022 we'd have a 90% urban recycling availability. For those in more rural counties, such as I represent, you'd have to have one drop-off center in counties under 100,000 and one per 50,000 in counties larger than that. So the idea is to get the process going, get recycling available in whatever means is best suited for that particular community. I'm particularly pleased that as we work on this, and again, it's a consensus among all the interest groups, that we're going to try to minimize landfilling. I happen to live in Lapeer County. We are on I-69. Every day of my life that I drive on I-69, I am passed by Canadian garbage trucks. They're coming here in massive quantities. Many constituents are not happy with that. I've not been happy with that for a lot of years. If we can get into more recycling and less just simplistic dumping it in the ground, I think everybody's going to be far better off. So anyway, those are the conclusion of my comments, Madam Chair, and I'll defer to Representative Sowerby.
Well, Chairman Howell, I want to thank you for bringing this issue before your committee here. I'm excited about dealing with this issue. I want to thank all the stakeholders that participated in this rewrite, whereby I don't feel it's a perfect bill. It never can be a perfect bill. Can we do more about recycling? Possibly, but then you've got a whole challenge of getting all those stakeholders to come together to agree on something. So I think that this bill really helps move the needle considerably from what we've had in the past. in the 90s, I served as a Macomb County Commissioner and watched as things changed in the solid waste planning process and creating the commissions and what the laws were doing then. And then I went to Clinton Township, the largest, most populated township in the state, and served for 17 years as the board of director, along with 7 other communities, for a waste disposal authority. That was a challenge, but all adhering to the laws of the state and what you could do. I was proud, coming from Clinton Township, that back in the mid-'80s, they were a catalyst in creating 3 types of curbside service, and that was not only solid waste, but recycling and composting, offered to all single-family residences. They were one of the first in the state to do that and still do that today, but that doesn't always happen in all communities, and it's not always made readily available, especially for the recycling and the composting. So these bills help move that considerably, because if we are going to preserve space in our landfills, if we are going to move the needle on how we do our recycling, this is what's going to help go in the right direction. So the bill that I've sponsored, 5813, does create a process for any new landfills. It limits what existing counties have. If you have a landfill or an incinerator, the idea is not to create new ones within your county unless you can create a sound argument as to why you need it. If you have an existing landfill or existing facility, you can expand it based on what sizes are allowed. It also creates new fees. The fees haven't been raised in 25 years. So the fees for permitting and for operation are basically doubling, and that was based basically on the cost of living and how things have changed in the last 25 years. So the fee schedules double in each of the categories in this bill. It also defines a clear process for landfill gas management. Something that had not ever been fully defined, and this goes into great detail, whether you're a municipal landfill or a commercial landfill. Type 2, there is specific requirements for gas management that everybody has to adhere to. There's new reporting processes in this bill that every facility has to follow, and creates streamlining, but a clear understanding of that. Inspections are very important. So it allows EGLE or designated representatives, say county health inspectors, to actually get access to the facilities to make certain that they are operating properly and per the laws allowed on them. There was always problems accessing sometimes to these facilities. And then it creates a whole process for post-closure, for closing down the landfills. There was some, Richfield, a lot of problems in the past. What this does is still requires the facility operators 30 years to manage that. But for the good actors who manage the facility, the closure of it properly, and demonstrate there's no leachate, no mitigating gas issues, things of that sort, if they can determine that, it allows them to get out of the post-closure process after 15 years instead of 30 years. However, if there's bad actors and that landfill is not properly being managed, there is language in here that allows the state to make that landfill continue to be monitored beyond the 30 years. So that's the basic in a nutshell, and happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Representatives, it appears your testimony was so concise, the committee does not have any questions.
Thank you.
If I could indulge for a minute, because Representative Riley brought up a good point about composting. I want to just share a little experience with that. Certainly, I'm a free enterprise-oriented person, But the problem is with the townships trying to regulate the composting is that requires that all these 1,500 townships, cities, and villages develop their own unique ordinances to regulate it. In Lapeer County, we had the circumstance where a company bought an old gravel pit site and just started bringing this material in vast quantities. The stench was horrendous. It became a huge nuisance for the neighbors. So they're stuck with the situation. Do they get together and file a nuisance lawsuit to try to clean it up? Does somehow the township, after the fact, try to come up with a regulatory scheme? It would have been much easier for the community, the township, the citizens, if there were some state standards as to what's the best practice. You know, when you handle this stuff, how do you separate it? How do you contain because there are ways to do it. So anyway, that's my perspective on that.
And if I could, Mr. Chairman, add
Yes.
to that, very similar experience in Clinton Township. We had a facility, and we heard Kerrin mention Macomb Township, and a person that owned facilities in Macomb Township brought in this huge, we're talking 150 square cubic feet of compost from a Detroit facility into a community of 100,000 people, neighboring large communities. And the state hadn't clearly defined it. We had to sue. And the problem is when you go through that, the cost for the legal costs are tremendous, and the problem doesn't go away for years. So by creating what we're doing here, it is creating that clear understanding. The end product is wonderful. You know, people want it. It's a great soil, and there's a whole science into being able to turn that composting properly and manage it so it doesn't smell. Unfortunately, there's a few bad actors out there, large or small, that don't do it properly, and the state needs to be able to come in and regulate that. But more importantly, that's why we need to cite specific compost facilities to deal with this in the future.
Representative Eisen, I think you had another question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it'd almost be beneficial to have a place where you could take all this compost and they could put it to good use, and it's in Macomb County, and instead of stinking up a field, this stuff could be producing gas, which could be making electricity. So maybe it would be a good option to have an outlet for some of this place that could be used. This is positive stuff, okay? This is recyclable electricity. You bury it, it turns to gas, they take that gas, they make a turbine, it makes electricity, okay? I mean, isn't this what we're all about, okay? Instead of windmills and all this other stuff that doesn't work. So anyway, it just seems like it could be a good out maybe to have instead of burying it in Lapeer County, bring it up to Macomb County landfill where they're making electricity. That's kind of my issue here, is that there is something good that comes out of this.
We aren't burying it. We're composting it in facilities.
And then everybody complains about the stink and smell and everything like that. And then what do they do with it afterwards?
It's topsoil.
It's processed?
Yes, it becomes topsoil, and great topsoil.
And they use it on fields? Farmers use it to put it in their
Anywhere that
fields?
needs new topsoil.
Not the farmers I know. Thank you.
If I could make one last comment then. The goal of this legislation is not to ban things. You know, there are certainly, if it's going to be done on a localized basis to make these plans, we want them to take recycling, composting into consideration. But that doesn't mean they're not going to be approving the kind of thing you're talking about, Representative, where that may be a key part of Macomb or St. Clair's plan.
Very good.
Thank you, Representative Calley and Vice Chair Wakeman, for taking care of that portion of the hearing. Moving on to the other sponsors, we have Representative Robbie and Representative O'Malley, who are sponsors of the bills, and I'm pleased to see they are here today ready to testify. Welcome this morning.
All right, that sounds good. Thank you, all of the committee members, for hearing my testimony today and for considering these bills. You've already heard a little bit about what this legislation actually does, but I'll just go over it again for you. really, House Bill 5814 is about protecting taxpayers. That's really what this comes down to. It's about making sure that we, the taxpayers of the state of Michigan, are not on the hook for landfills that are not able to clean up the messes that they make. And all this is increasing the amount of financial assurance that landfills have to prove, in order for them to continue operating. Again, it protects taxpayers, but it also protects the adjacent landowners. The longer that these landfills go unremediated, the more the surrounding communities become contaminated. Many of these landfills are situated among farming communities, and I know that it is something that impacts those farmlands pretty directly if we're not doing remediation efforts to actually clean up the messes that these landfills are making. So all this is saying is we're just, making sure that those financial assurance bonds are at an adequate level, and it's clarifying a few other areas in regards to the financial insurance bonds. So it's a long bill, but the idea behind it is pretty simple. And so, Mr. Chairman, I will just leave it at that for now.
Thank you, Representative. We'll hear from Representative O'Malley, then we'll have
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Honored to be here with you, Representative. Representative's bill's a long one. Mine's a short one. We balance. House Bill 5815 would require that Eagle conduct at least one annual inspection at all materials utilization facilities that have a general permit and would require to be registered. Also, it would require that an individual hauling solid waste who is operating within a county that has a materials management plan shall provide recycling services that meet the requirements of the benchmark recycling standard for a single-family residence, as explained by Chairman Howell. Finally, this bill would allow for the department to create rules for landfill requirements. That's it. I look forward to seeing this long overdue bipartisan package moving forward, and thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. Are there any questions for the representatives as to their particular bills? You obviously did an excellent job. You've answered everybody's question. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have Representatives Van Single and Tate as to their bills. I see Representative Tate is here. Is anyone here on behalf of Representative Van Single? I guess you're the whole show, Mr. Tate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Alone and unafraid here. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to speak on House Bill 5817. I will be brief in my remarks. I do want to just talk about the spirit and the intent of the bill, just with increasing, obviously one of the components is increasing our recycling rates. And just speaking, coming from the city of Detroit, just as an example, I know that as a commitment that our local leaders are in support of. We just received a couple of grants to start increasing and carrying out services around multifamily units and other commercial properties. So this is something that's certainly top of mind. I know in the city of Detroit and kind of adjacent areas. So 5817, Ms. O'Brien did a wonderful job, I think, and succinct job just with the material management plans. Just want to just talk about a couple of points, and the idea behind it is looking at increasing voices in the community. So a couple of points: broadens the scope of materials that counties will need to identify and assure capacity to manage. It encourages the creation of regional or multi-county plans, enhances the importance of local zoning for siting and developing materials utilization facilities to ensure communities are empowered to do what works best for them to achieve their goals. So just being able just to look at that and try to support and incentivize community voices as they're going along through this process. And I will end it there. And thank you again, Mr. Chair, and see if anyone has any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Representative Tate? Okay. I would just comment that I appreciate you pointing out the impact in rural areas and the impact in urban areas. This is a bill, I think, that can address all across the spectrum, and it's designed to develop plans that fit the immediate community it's in. So hopefully we can begin to solve so many of these long-standing problems we're all facing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this point, we're going to hear from Liz Brown from Eagle. She is the Assistant Division Director of the Materials Management Division. Is she here or is she on Zoom?
Hello, on Zoom, virtually. Again, I'm Liz Brown, and I'm the Assistant Division Director for Eagle's Materials Management Division. And I'd really like to thank Hal for bringing this package of bills before the committee and for his leadership on the issues. I'd also like to thank the other bill sponsors who did a great job in summarizing the various pieces of these packages, as well as the large stakeholder group for their efforts. And Eagle appreciates the opportunity to be here today to testify to this package of bills that represent the hard work and dedication of a very broad-based team of stakeholders focused on increasing recycling and assuring modernized and appropriate waste management methods are in place. These bills derive their content from the outcome of two work groups that we've heard a little bit about already, the Governor's Recycling Council and our Solid Waste and Sustainability Advisory Panel. So to give a little background on each of those, the Governor's Recycling Council was convened by Governor Snyder in 2014 to provide recommendations to double the amount of residential solid waste recycled. The final report included recommendations that included creating a statewide education and engagement campaign, and hopefully you are familiar with our recycling raccoons, authorizing a Michigan Recycling Market Development Initiative, creating a system to enhance convenient recycling access across the state, establishing a Michigan Recycling Improvement Fund to fund recycling initiatives, and also to measure progress and work towards clear goals. And in conjunction with that, while the GRC was convening, the department brought together stakeholders to provide recommendations to comprehensively update our 40-year-old solid waste law. These recommendations from this group included updating the solid waste management planning process, which was traditionally focused on landfilling, to a more materials management planning process that seeks to find uses for all materials at the end of their initial purpose. It provides regulatory oversight of waste utilization activities like composting and materials recovery facilities, fortifying financial assurance and post-closure provisions for landfills and other facilities, and ensuring adequate funding for state and local implementation of their responsibilities. We now have a new constituted work group. We had a public input process that has been discussed by Kerrin O'Brien and the chair that was used to obtain additional viewpoints on the initial work group's recommendation. And these comments received from the public were discussed and addressed by the two work groups. The meetings, reports, and the recommendations of the two groups have been broadcast through radio, news releases, listservs, and articles have been displayed. We worked with organizational groups to get them into their newsletters so that the word about the process could get out to as many people as possible. And because of the commitment to having a variety of stakeholders represent and agree on the conversion of recommendations into statutory changes, the two work groups were combined to become the Solid Waste and Recycling Advisors, or what we call the SWARA. While the SWARA currently has a limited number of representatives, it was verified that the 70 or so active participants in the development process felt that there was at least one organization on the SWARA that would continue to represent their interests. And Eagle continues to look to the SWARA representatives to appropriately bring input to the group on behalf of their members. As a result of the inclusive and transparent process used to develop the concepts embodied in this legislation, the proposals behind these recommendations should be considered as a whole. They are not focused on a limited set of issues or constituencies, as is often the case with statutory changes. Not every piece of it will appeal to every organization, but dozens of organizations work together to come up with a package that supports the vision of increasing recycling and assuring proper waste management to protect the environment and public health. While a tremendous amount of work has gone into the recommended package, Eagle recognizes that the state is financially in a different position today than we were the last few years. As the package moves through the legislative process, it will be important that any modifications to the legislation do not result in increased costs without a dedicated funding source to support those costs. And again, the focus of the bills were that the existing statute focused on developing landfill disposal capacity, and it was very successful in that regard. It was at the expense of more sustainable ways of managing materials like recycling and composting. The purpose of this package of bills is to not only modernize the current statute, but also to refocus the direction of solid waste management to utilization practices. So to look at solid waste as a commodity rather than trash. Additionally, this opportunity was used to reorganize the statute itself. After having many amendments to Part 115 over the last 40 years, some cleanup was necessary. While the changes appear numerous, many of them were done to bring the statute up to current industry practice and program growth, not necessarily new language. Other changes, thankfully, were to create a better flow in the statute and to reflect changes in statutory language processes. With so many amendments over time, the statute had become difficult to read. These bills provide a package that is much easier to follow. You've heard already from the bill sponsors about what components are included in the legislation, so I'll focus on some of the impacts of what those changes mean for you, your constituents, your local units of government, and businesses in your districts. For the impacts on citizens, it provides expansion of recycling options in their community, an increase in job opportunities and a stronger local economy, and increased regulatory oversight of materials management facilities to decrease nuisance conditions and risks. For local units of government, it eliminates the regulatory requirements to manage the import and export of waste across their county. It reduces the county level effort to ensure disposal capacity and siting of landfills. There are fewer local resources needed to address our materials management facilities, and increased tools to establish recycling collection systems and coordination with the private sector. It also assures that valuable materials will continue to be utilized and circulated in the local economies. Now for businesses, there are additional opportunities for and focus on managing what has been waste as a resource. It's increased ability to meet zero landfill goals. More recycled and previously utilized materials will be available within Michigan with the cost savings over raw materials. Broader disposal options when needed due to the elimination of the import-export provisions on landfilled waste. More level playing field for businesses interested in investing in materials utilization facilities, equipment, and technology. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Ms. Brown. Are there questions from committee members for Representative Riley?
Yeah, I just had a question. Do we have any idea how many additional state or county or municipal employees will have to be hired for for these plans that we've got out here, and what's going to be the additional cost to the citizen for these plans?
The department is only looking at about 6 additional staff to implement our part of the plan. The counties will most likely have to either hire or engage staff they already have in working on the planning aspects. There is funding available for that. That was part of the funding package with the Renew Michigan funding. So all the funding that is needed has been addressed through last year's Renew Michigan funding. And we are looking at a limited number of staff to hire to address the additional facilities that we will be regulating.
And how about the cost to the consumer? It just seems like all this regulation is going to have a cost. Have we done any calculations to see what the cost is going to be for the individuals?
We have not. I believe it was you that expressed earlier a concern about all the requirements for composters and the little guy that wants to get into the business. And we actually have tiered levels of authorization for those types of facilities. So if it's a little guy that just wants to get started, the most he may have to do is fill out a form once a year and provide it to us so that we know that they're there and what's going on. There would not be many costs. As I believe you heard Kerrin O'Brien indicate, with the composters, there has historically been a problem, and the composters themselves that were doing a legitimate job and trying to be successful were being hampered by the facilities that weren't doing a good job, and they've looked to us to help them in terms of creating this level playing field for them to operate in and giving us the tools we need to better address those who are not doing it appropriately.
Thank you. My main concern is really just the estimated cost from all this regulation. When you start putting regulation in that changes from what the present regulation is, costs are going to go up. And so somebody, it seems, should be calculating what these costs are going to be. If you can no longer have composting waste within so many feet of a wetlands or a stream or a lake, and that's changed from what it was previously. That's just one area I looked at. There's probably hundreds of areas where this is going to increase the cost. And so that's what I'd like to see, if some calculations done on what this cost is going to be for these bills. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Eagle? Apparently not. Thank you very much, Ms. Brown. We appreciate your testimony.
Thank you for the time.
At this point, we have a full committee present, so I'm going to temporarily revert on the agenda. We have House Bill 5777, which we heard testimony on last meeting. This is a bill that simply standardizes the notice for significant land disposal or acquisition, meaning parcels of 80 acres or more. For instance, last year it affected about 21 parcels statewide, so it's not a huge impact, but this will assure the public and the various interest groups that they have notice prior to an action being taken. So unless there's any additional discussion, I would ask for a motion to refer that bill to the Ways and Means Committee. Representative Wakeman so moves. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Chairman Howell?
Yes.
Representatives Wakeman?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Riley?
Yes.
Rendon?
Yes.
Eisen?
Yes.
Sowerby?
Yes.
Cambenzi?
Yes.
Pohetzky?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, you have 9 yeas, 0 nays, and 0 passes. House Bill 5777 is referred with recommendation to the Committee on Ways and Means.
Thank you. The bill is so referred. Now, going back to our recycling discussion, next on my list are the Michigan Waste and Recycling Group, Kevin Kendall, Tanisha Sanders, Eric Schaefer. Are they here, or are they on Zoom? Or oh, there she is, right instantly.
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
Welcome. You are up. We're
Thank
eager to
you.
hear from
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Great. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can. Yes, we can.
Perfect. Again, good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Tanisha Sanders, and I'm the Director of Government Affairs for Waste Management. Addressing you today, though, in my role as the Legislative Chair for the Michigan Waste and Recycling Association. I'm joined today on Zoom by MWRA's President, Kevin Kendall, who is with Republic Waste Services, and Eric Schaefer, who serves as MWRA's Technical Standards Chair, also with Waste Management. We appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today at this very important hearing on Part 115, the proposed rewrite of the state's solid waste rules. The proposed rewrite provides an important and timely opportunity to update Michigan's waste rules, and our association and its members seek to be an integral part of that process. As we begin this discussion, I want to first comment on the profound impact that the pandemic has had on us all. The waste industry provides a critical service in the health and safety of every community, every industry, and every family, and we take this public role very seriously. I think it's also important to frame our discussion this morning in the context of the COVID era. The Part 115 rewrite never envisioned these circumstances, nor the conditions under which our economy, its businesses, job providers, and our industry specifically reboot and recover from the economic hit we're all enduring as a result of the pandemic. We know from experts that it will take time, several years, to recover. As we consider the provisions contained in the Part 115 rewrite, we need to be mindful of the hurdles that manufacturing communities face in Michigan. For those of you who aren't familiar, the MWRA represents businesses and municipalities that advocate and provide safe, economically sustainable, and environmentally sound waste hauling, disposal, recycling, composting, and landfill gas to energy programs. Our membership is comprised of solid waste and recycling haulers, municipal solid waste landfills, construction and demolition landfills, transfer stations, material recovery facilities, and compost facilities. We also retain professional members that serve as expert consultants or are affiliated with legal firms with an expertise in waste management and the public policy arena. Excuse me. Together, the Michigan waste industry contributes over $990 million of revenue and provides over 8,000 jobs for Michigan residents. On the environmental side, we operate more than 250 facilities, 5,000 pieces of equipment, and we safely and sustainably manage over 11 million tons of waste per year in this state. We are the essential service that keeps communities safe and clean, and we take great pride in the work of our people. Many of you in the room and on the call today have been working on Part 115 for several years. This is a top policy matter for our members. I'd like to thank the bill sponsors, members of the committee, the department, and all of the stakeholders who were part of the Part 115 work group committee that were able to work through some differences and reach some type of common ground and get us where we are today. For well over the last 5 years, probably a lot closer to 6, the waste industry has been actively engaged and at the table with many of you, and we appreciate the collaborative approach in developing this bill package. We support the policy goals that bill sponsors are looking to achieve through an update to the state's solid waste management plan, including the emphasis on improving Michigan's recycling rates and material reuse. At the same time, our review of the package has identified some issues we want to flag, some opportunities for improvement that we see specifically within House Bill 5813, 5814, and 5817. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to MWRA President Kevin Kendall, who will walk you through our priorities as an industry. Kevin, are you on?
Yes, I am.
Great.
Good morning, everybody. Hello, Chairman Howell. It's good to see you again. I presented to your committee about 2 years ago. and I appreciate the opportunity to be here today on behalf of our member companies. Are you seeing me?
You're right there in living color.
Okay, great. So I appreciate seeing you again, Chairman. The waste industry, we realize, of course, the importance of this legislation, and we are a leading proponent of sustainably managing materials in a way that benefits the economy, the communities we serve, and our environment. Our members are an integral part of the Michigan material management system, and we appreciate the opportunity to provide specific comments for your consideration. As Tanya indicated, our remarks this morning are intended to reflect our association's general consensus with the proposed bills, but also to flag a few areas of concern that we believe will require further discussion and resolution. While we touch on just a few of our top priorities during comments today, we are submitting to the committee a document that we have prepared that highlights outstanding issues in further detail. As Tanya indicated, the bills that most impact us are 513, 514, 5813, 5814, and 5817. They contain specific language to our industry, and they will be the focus of our comments here today. The first issue that I'd like to point out would be under gas collection. As we've heard, our industry is very familiar with gas collection systems. We use those systems to provide energy, as has been discussed today. The rewrite of this, Part 115 in House Bill 5813, contains new provisions for the installation and management of landfill gas control systems. Initially, the language that was very prescriptive and far exceeded the existing federal NSPS standards, which all of our member landfills operate under currently. MWRA has had several conversations with the department, and we've been able to reach a compromise on many of the earlier issues. While many have been resolved, there are still a handful that need further consideration and to be resolved. But we do want to thank the department for their efforts in working through these issues with us. And we look forward to continuing those conversations through this process shortly. Our second concern would be in House Bill 5813, and that would be the landfill operating fees. Early on in the process, MWRA and the department were able to agree to double the fees that we pay for construction permits related to our landfills. The current language that's before you would double the cost of our operating permits that we pay to the state to operate our landfills. And we feel that doubling them is quite excessive, especially on our larger facilities, which the majority of our member landfills are, the 3,000 ton a day plus landfills. The fees are going to double from $30,000 to $60,000. We feel, as Tanisha pointed out, with the economic conditions that we're all facing today, this is going to have a big impact, not only on our member communities, but also on industry, the communities we serve, the townships, the municipalities. So we have grave concerns there with doubling those fees. And, you know, as Tanisha did point out, it's been really tough with the COVID. I mean, it's been tough on business in general, obviously. It's tough on the states. It's tough on the communities. Revenue streams are shrinking. And to experience, you know, a doubling of those fees at this time, we just really hope that all stakeholders will take into consideration the impact that that might have. The next issue that we want to bring up today would be under House Bill 5814, and it has to do with the post-closure increase for leachate disposal and transportation costs. You know, the Richfield landfill has been discussed this morning, and yes, that's a terrible situation there with Richfield. The vast majority of landfills are good players in this state and have been. And our association definitely believes you have to have the proper financial assurance to deal with any bad player that would be out there. So we're not against the financial assurance as it relates to handling landfill leachate. But we do think that a more site-specific rationale would be the best approach to this. Rather than increasing the cost fourfold for all landfills on leachate. The proposal before you would represent a four-fold increase for all landfills, and the cost of landfill leachate disposal is different. It's vastly different with every facility, what stage of life the facility is in, different factors like that. So we really propose that this be revisited, and we feel we did have a good proposal on the table if anyone would like to take a look at that. The next bill part of the bill that we want to bring up is House Bill 5814, functional stability and financial assurance. And we applaud our partners over at Eagle for the work that they did with us on these two critical components. They've both been discussed this morning. But yeah, there was some really good work done with functional stability and financial assurance, and we thank our partners over at Eagle. Review, we didn't have a lot of time to review the greatest and version of this that has come out recently, but there was language inserted about a contaminant of emerging concern in House Bill 5812, which would be PFAS. Our industry knows a lot about PFAS. The last 2 years, we've been leaders in helping everyone understand the impacts of landfill leachate and PFAS and the impacts on wastewater treatment plants. In fact, at 2 o'clock today, I'll be in a meeting with MPART and our association and the wastewater treatment plants as we continue to work together to try and figure out how best to deal with this symbiotic issue that we have of biosolids and landfill leachate. But we feel that the language that's been inserted is arbitrary and incomplete, and we feel like unless we can come up with something better, it should just be stricken altogether. Under House Bill 5817, we believe that we continue to work with our membership through some of the issues in there. We do plan to get back with some additional comments regarding 5817 as we finish up our review of that. But it appears to considerably alter the autonomy of our host communities and the county solid waste planning process. We appreciate the importance of your work and look forward to discussions with you to ensure this timely update to Michigan solid waste management policy is thoughtful, practical, and achievable by members of our industry working with government agencies and communities. We believe the proposed bill package is a good first step and reflects the immense amount of work put forth by all parties. We will continue to engage with policy interests to be a part of the process and to provide achievable, viable solutions wherever we can. Thanks again for your time and attention today. We welcome any questions that you might have.
Do committee members have any questions for the Waste and Recycling Coalition Association? Representative Sarby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mine is about the recycling process and electronic recycling. That the bills don't necessarily go far enough in promoting electronic recycling, but some of the curbside hauling companies have taken it upon themselves to create programs for communities for that electronic recycling. Can you tell us, either yourself or Tanisha, what companies are doing to help promote this and further moving the needle publicly on e-cycling?
Sure. You know, companies like Republic and I believe Waste Management do offer community-based electronics recycling programs. I know we have those programs available to our commercial and industrial customers as well. And we've actually recycled a lot of electronics this past year, Republic has anyway, out of some major manufacturing facilities here in the great state of Michigan. I doubt that you're going to see a curbside electronics recycling program be viable. But like I said, yeah, any community that wants to host a electronics recycling program on a given day, kind of like a household hazardous waste program, they have the ability to do that. They could reach out to Republic or Waste Management or any of our member communities that are member companies that are serving the communities that we service.
So, if I may, Mr. Chairman? But my point is more to what is your industry doing to create greater participation amongst your members to encourage the electronic recycling? After all, a lot of this stuff ends up in the landfills. You guys own the landfills, and that's not good for the sustainability of the landfills. So if we're going to help on this whole discussion, I hear you about some of your concerns on some of these bills, but we also have concerns about recycling as well. So we need the industry to help the communities in properly disposing of the electronics. So what are you doing, if we're not doing it in the bills, what are you doing as a responsible business owners in the waste hauling business to move the needle, to up the game on electronic recycling, because this is just growing more and more in all communities?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we have programs available to the communities that we service where they can provide an electronics program, recycle program on any given day that they would choose. We market aggressively to our commercial and industrial customer base that we have these programs available. Not only electronics, but universal waste services to keep batteries and light bulbs and those things out of the landfills. So I don't know, other than trying to sell the service and make available those programs to the communities that we partner with. I don't know what else I can really tell you that we're doing at this time on that. Tanisha, do you have any thoughts on that?
And yes, thanks, Kevin. Thank you for your question, Representative Sowerby. I'd just like to add, and this is more specifically from a waste management standpoint, we have a comprehensive educational program at Waste Management. We've launched our Recycle Often, Recycle Right campaign, which basically promotes the basics of recycling by simplifying the guidelines, but empowering everyone to become recycling ambassadors. And a part of that campaign also encompasses e-waste. So I'm more than happy to share some of that information with you.
Representative Kimbenzi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to share a little bit of what's going on in my community in the Upper Peninsula, we are facing decreased capacity in one of our cells at the landfill. We actually went ahead running into the same problems with trying to get our recycling numbers up to make it worthwhile to kind of drive the cost down overall, either in the tipping fees or in what it costs to haul the recycling, either all the way downstate or all the way down to the southern end of Wisconsin. Bought a glass crushing machine, and we're working with Michigan Tech to see if we can recycle glass, get it into our road system or some other way to reuse it. But we've also looked at, should we charge for weight at the curb like they do in some countries in Europe? We're trying to kind of combat it, I guess, by either, hitting people in the pocketbook or looking at, a state mandate with laws like this. So it's been a problem. I know since I've been in government, whether it's local or here, getting people to change their habits is very hard. However, just talking about if we could put aluminum at the curbside and get rid of the 10-cent bottle deposit, there's no way that people want to give that up. So I think at this point, looking at bills like this is a worthwhile effort, and certainly working with all the stakeholders is going to be important to make sure we at least get it right to start with, or close to right. So thank you.
Thank you very much. We have arrived at the end of our hearing for today. As I indicated earlier, we are going to pick this up again at a future hearing, hopefully next week, if we can get it scheduled. But for the moment, I'm going to put the committee at ease. We have a resolution that is being introduced in the House today. I had hoped to have it last week, but they didn't get introduced in time. So I'm going to go at ease and reconvene as soon as the House reads in that resolution. It has to do with deer blinds and rulings, and because the NRC is going to take it up very quickly, we need to get a decision by June 5. Representative Sowerby.
Mr. Chairman, how will the members know when we're going to reconvene? Will you put out?
We will text or call each member, so we don't use up people's time unnecessarily, because I can't say precisely what time they're going to read that resolution in. But to make it expeditious, as soon as that is done, we'll get the word out and we'll reconvene right here in this room for that one topic. So with that, the committee is going at ease.